With the update of version 1.5, verse 1999 introduces two new characters, Spathodea and Ezra. But along with their cute and badassery, if you read between the lines of the story being showcased within Revival the Uluru Games event, it hides one of the most fascinating and important subjects in the entire world of Reverse 1999. Now if you've already played through the event, you might have an idea what I'm talking about, but before diving into the details, let's do them some justice and talk about some intriguing lore and references that I found during my research into Spathodea and Ezra's character designs.
Now it's time for Spathodea!
When it comes to Spathodea, her name actually comes from the word Spathodea campanulata, which is basically a type of plant or a flower. Now one thing to note, however, is that this plant isn't native to Australia where Spathodea lives. Apparently it's native to dry humid forests and savannas like Angola, Ghana, or Ethiopia in Africa, and they eventually made their way to Australia through dispersion across the world. Which is very cool because in the game it describes that Spathodea's family were immigrants from another country, just like the dispersion of the actual plant in real life. Then the developer takes things one step further and incorporates the visual aspects of the flower into her very own outfit. For example, Spathodea's Insight 2 outfit showcases her cuffs and hems being reflections of not only the fiery passion of hers, but the Spathodea flower's petals. And personally, I thought that was an absolutely fantastic inclusion of displaying both her character and backstory. And with her bright personality, she of course had little trouble adjusting to her new lifestyle in Australia, eventually coming across her passion and fondness in boxing. But what I found most fascinating is that while her attitude of passion gives her undoubtedly a very interesting and unique personality, it does end up creating some issues.
I have a strange feeling of deja vu. Something like this happened before, but I don't remember what it really was.
So during the event, it's revealed that Spathodea was a reincarnation of Flammy, or the first priestess of the Uluru Games. But currently, the Uluru Games have been basically abolished, and Ulu, Flammy's old friend, calls upon Spathodea, the reincarnation of Flammy, in an attempt to revive the Uluru Games that they adored in the past. Hence the title of the event, Revival the Uluru Games. And here lies the problem. Essentially, the Uluru Games were initially intended solely for Arcanists, but since they eventually got abolished, Arcanists no longer had a sporting event to take part in, and their only choice was to join the human-made events where the regulations would dictate that the usage of arcane skills would be forbidden and against the rules, which eventually leads to painkiller overdose problem because Arcanists' bodies were known to be inherently weaker than humans. And in the eyes of Flammy, or by extension Spathodea, she becomes very prejudiced towards humans, believing that they are greedy and always rob Arcanists of their happiness just to assert their authority. At least that's the initial conflict of Spathodea in a nutshell. Then enters Ezra, our second new character in version 1.5.
Please don't mind me, and take your time.
With the inclusion of Ezra in the event, things get a bit more interesting. It's very clear throughout the story that he just wants to help people around him as much as possible. Considering that his name is Ezra, literally meaning to aid and protect in Hebrew, and that Theodorus collectively means God's gift, really emphasizes his personality quite well. But when Ezra was trying to help Spathodea with her sick conditions due to her reincarnation, his good deeds go underappreciated because Spathodea finds out that Ezra was a human this entire time. Now before we continue, when I first found out that Ezra was human, I didn't think too much of it until I realized that Ezra was going to be a playable character. Like, how is Ezra going to be playable if he doesn't even have abilities to use, like arcane skills? I mean, maybe the lore of the game doesn't have to directly correlate to the mechanics of the game, but I always figured they are related, otherwise it wouldn't make sense. Now let me be very clear. Humans surviving the storm in the game's story isn't too surprising since there are places that the storm doesn't affect, like Verton's bag, the Foundation, the base of Manus Vindictae, or apparently even the Uluru Stadium, so surviving is not an issue. But how can Ezra even fight? Then after a bit of research, I learned that it's not that complicated and much simpler than I thought.
Please be careful. Even the slightest breath would blow them all over the place.
Essentially, the reason why Ezra could probably be playable without using any arcane skill is because of his mushrooms, the parasitic plants that grows on the host's body. And in Ezra's case, these are in the form of honey fungus and ghost fungus. The honey fungus is a type of mushroom that saps life away from the host, which makes sense as it debuffs the enemy as indicated within his skills. And as for the ghost fungus, apparently it has bioluminescent properties, which is being associated with the idea of discernment, utilizing light as its source of buff for our characters. Honestly, considering all the thought put into Ezra's kit in terms of everything relating to lore, I thought it made sense as to why he is a playable character. Now, while we're on the topic of mushrooms, it's a bit of a tangent, but Ezra wears this gigantic mushroom in his Insight 2 outfit called the Amanita muscaria. Considering Ezra is completely obsessed about mushrooms, just like how Spathodea is passionate about boxing, I thought it made sense for him to be wearing it, at least aesthetically. But then I also learned that this gigantic mushroom, just like the Spathodea flower, was also not native to Australia, and apparently it only reached Australia through transportation, similar to how the Spathodea flower reached Australia through dispersion. Now, I don't know if this is just a coincidence or an intended parallelism between the two characters, but I still thought it was pretty cool. Now, as I mentioned in the beginning of this video, the dynamic between Spathodea and Ezra, as well as the entire plot of the event, tells a much bigger story than you would think. For example, the rift between humans and arcanists, the prejudice being associated with characters' origins, and again reflecting the idiom of don't judge a book by its cover. I mean, we saw something like this throughout the entire game, even going back to Melania and Pickles during the Theft of the Rimic Cup, Jessica, Blondie, and Tooth Fairy story during A Nightmare at Green Lake, and even Kalabauna and Kumar in The Journey to Moorponk, and the main story constantly drills home the idea that there is an unmeasurable conflict between humans and arcanists using the Foundation and the Manus Vindictae. But going back to the story of Spathodea and Ezra and the revival, the Uluru games as a whole, the story heavily highlights and focuses on the conflict between humans and arcanists yet again. It almost feels like a gigantic setup for a future of the game, but thankfully the event does end on a much hopeful note between Spathodea and Ezra. The Uluru Stadium essentially becomes a symbol and a catalyst of equality even amidst the changes of time, the havocs created by the storm, and also throughout the different perspectives and opinions of the people. And the reconciliation between the emotional-driven arcanist Spathodea and the logic-driven human Ezra really hold a deep meaning on a conceptual level in my opinion. And also, why is this stadium also a literal anti-storm landmark? Maybe we'll find out in the future. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to leave a like and comment below on your thoughts. It really does help me know that you enjoy these videos. And again, thank you to Reverse1999 for supporting my channel and making this video possible. And if any of this is interesting to you and you still haven't tried out the game, make sure to use the link in the description of this video to get started in version 1.5 of Reverse1999. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you next time.